Hey there guys, Brian Henney here. This is going to be my first video that I'm putting on my personal channel outside of my actual first video, which is just basically an introduction and background. So this video that I'm going to be doing is going to be about the Tuesday primaries that are going on today. Hopefully I can get this on before they're actually over and before we actually know the results, because I'm going to be doing what I think is going to happen. So hopefully I get this on before then. If not, sorry about that. So anyway, yeah, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the different states that are voting today, their primary systems, and what I expect to happen. So basically, I want to start out by talking about the different types of primaries that there are, at least going on today. I'm not going to go into caucuses because there are no caucuses today. So they've got open, semi-open, semi-closed, and closed. There's at least one of each type of primary going on today, and Illinois and Missouri are both open primaries. Ohio is a semi-open primary. North Carolina is a semi-closed primary, and Florida is a closed primary. So those are the states voting today on both sides. And what those mean is, so the open primaries really just means that anyone can vote on any ballot. So it doesn't mean that you can both vote for a Democratic candidate and a Republican candidate on the same, like you can't vote for both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in the same, like the one person can't vote for both of them. So what you do is basically in an open primary, they just ask you which ballot you want. Do you want a Republican ballot? Do you want a Democratic ballot? Or something else? But those are the two, it's a two-party system. So those are the ones that you're probably going to be picking out of. So it doesn't matter. You can be a Republican and you can get a Democratic ballot. You can be a Democrat and get a Republican ballot. Or you can be an independent or Green Party, whatever it is, and get either one of those two. But that means that those are partisan elections, so it means that you'll be voting in their primary and all of the Democratic primaries. If you're getting a Democratic ballot, you can't then also vote on the Republican ballot. So the pros and cons of this are that the pros are that everyone can just vote for who they want to vote for, no matter what party the person is. So if you're registered as a Republican, but you want to vote in the Democratic primary, you can do that, or vice versa. And the more beneficial thing is that undecided or unaffiliated voters or independent voters can vote in either side's primaries for who they want to win either side's primaries, who they support in the general election. So I think that's a major pro for it, because they're going to be voting in the general election and they're most likely going to be voting for either a Democrat or Republican, even though they're not registered with one of the parties, because those are the two candidates that are going to realistically have a chance of winning. So, yeah, so that's the open system. There's a slight difference between that and a semi-open. The main difference between semi-open, which is what Ohio is that if you're registered as a Republican in a semi-open primary, they will give you a Republican ballot unless you request a different ballot. So it's not very different. The problem that some people have with the different open types, I forgot to mention the cons, which is debatable whether it's really a con. Some people think that it's a term called rating, which is the idea that some people would vote for the opposite party's candidate who they see to be the weakest opponent, which could happen, but most likely that would be more would happen in a re-election rather than a re-election in a presidential campaign, when, like in 2012, we already knew that President Obama was going to be a Democratic candidate, so there could have been Democrats voting on the Republican side in open primaries, voting for who they saw as the weakest candidate, because they already know who their candidate is going to be. So I can see that problem, but in this election I don't see it as a real problem, because it doesn't really make sense when you don't know. Like, if you're a Republican who supports Donald Trump, for example, it doesn't really make sense for you to vote for one of the Democrats when you don't know that he's going to win in your state. So I don't really see it as a big problem, especially when it means that you're allowing people to vote for who they really want. That's just my personal opinion. I think that the open systems are better. But then there's the closed system, semi-closed. North Carolina is semi-closed. The main difference between semi-closed and closed is that Florida is closed, North Carolina is semi-closed. In Florida, the deadline to register to vote is the same deadline to register within the party that you're going to be voting on their ballot. So if you want to vote in the Republican primary, you have to be registered as a Republican on the deadline that you have to register to vote. Those are the same. So that's what the closed primary is. Semi-closed is, it means that you still have to register with that party, but you have until a later date to register. So in North Carolina, you have to register, if you want to vote in the Democratic primary, for example, you have to register as a Democrat, but you can do it up to Election Day. So if you come in on Election Day, you can register. You have to publicly acknowledge your affiliation to that party before you are allowed to vote on their ballot for their primary. So that's the difference. So it's pretty different between semi-closed and semi-open because you have to register with that party. You have to become affiliated with that party to be allowed to vote in that party's primary. So that's the difference between those four types and which states have which. So I'm going to go into starting with Ohio on the Democratic side. I'm going to start here with the Democratic side, I guess. Actually, you know what? No, I'm going to do it by state. So for Ohio, for Ohio, I'll start with the Democrats in Ohio. What I think is going to happen based on the polls, I don't think that the media does a good enough job reading into the polls because they tell you what the polls say, but anyone can go on to Real Clear Politics and see what the polls say, but they don't do a good enough job explaining in depth what the polls mean. So in Ohio, Hillary Clinton is winning in every poll I've seen in Ohio. However, the lead has been shrinking, and you have to consider what happened in Michigan last week. Bernie Sanders pulled off a major upset in Michigan, even though the aggregates had him averaging about 18 points down. Every poll had him down by over 10 points. And the reason for that is Michigan was an open primary. So it does make a difference, those different types of primaries, especially on the Democratic side, because Bernie Sanders does much better among independents than Hillary Clinton. So that's going to have an impact in some of the states because 3 of them are either open or semi-open. So in Ohio, it's semi-open, which just means that if they request a Democratic ballot, then they get a Democratic ballot and can vote in the Democratic primary. They don't have to register with the Democratic Party. So you're likely to have more independents voting in that type of election, which bodes well for Bernie Sanders, which means that he is likely going to outperform the polls because the polls are generally polling likely Democratic voters, which was the problem, or believed to be the problem in Michigan. So you're likely to see something similar to that in Ohio. He will almost certainly outperform the polls, which range from having him about 10 to 15 points down to, I think I saw one yesterday that had him down 6. So I believe it's going to be tight one way or the other, but my prediction on Ohio for the Democrats is that Bernie Sanders is going to win, but by similar to Michigan, somewhere about a slight win by less than 5 points. So that's what I'm thinking is going to happen in Ohio. On the Republican side, it's also actually going to be a tight matchup, which I didn't really expect really a week or two ago. I think Marco Rubio telling his supporters to support Kasich helped Kasich a little bit. John Kasich from Ohio. So he needs to win that state. But he looks like he has a good chance of winning it. He's been doing a lot better in recent polls. So I would say I think he's going to have a similar victory to that of Bernie Sanders. But fortunately for him, on the Republican side, Ohio is a winner-take-all state. So if he does win, he'll get all of the delegates there. So Trump could still win. Donald Trump could still win in Ohio. If he does, it'll probably be a slight victory. And I think John Kasich is going to get a slight victory again, less than 5 points in Ohio, and he'll get all the delegates there. So, on to Illinois. I'll do second, the Democratic side. This is an interesting one. A lot of the polls recently have it within 10. In fact, one had Bernie Sanders up by 2. And it's another open primary, which, like I already explained, bodes well for Bernie Sanders. So this one I think will not be as close because I actually think that Bernie Sanders is going to win by at least 5 points. I'm saying I would say I think it's safe to say he'll win Illinois. That's just my personal opinion, and I think it will be by at least 5 points, maybe over 10. And based on some of the other states that the polls have been really off on, it could be even more than that. So I think that he's going to win Illinois. On the Republican side, there's no reason to believe that Donald Trump is not going to win Illinois. I think he's been up in every poll in Illinois by a pretty decent margin, so there's no reason to believe he's not going to win there. I don't know exactly how much he'll win by, but yeah, I think it's safe to assume he's going to win Illinois. And Missouri is a bit interesting on both sides. There's only been, I think, I've only seen one poll of Missouri. I think I heard about another one that Bernie Sanders was winning, talking about the Democratic side. The one I saw, he was down by 7. There's not much polling on Missouri. It's right next to Kansas, which was a caucus state that Bernie Sanders won by over 35 points after the lone poll on it had him down by 10. So you could see something similar here in Missouri. I don't know if it's going to be that type of margin. It's not a caucus, which is another thing that bodes well for Bernie Sanders, is caucuses versus primaries. And I'll get into that another time when we have some caucuses. But I think based on that slight margin for Hillary Clinton and the other poll I heard about that I didn't actually see, so I'm not sure about this one, but that had him up by 1, bodes well for him because this is another open primary, which he does much better among independents consistently. So again, I think that Missouri is going to be over a 10-point win for Bernie Sanders. I think that's going to be a solid victory for him. And then on the Republican side, I think, I've seen mixed things. I would not be surprised if Donald Trump won, but I also could see Ted Cruz winning. However, he doesn't have the independent advantage that Bernie Sanders has, so open primaries don't really help him in the same way. Caucuses have at times, but again, there's low polling, so you don't really know. He's pulled out surprising wins in some states, so I could see Ted Cruz winning it, but I would probably say that I think Donald Trump's going to win there as well. So yeah, I guess moving on to North Carolina, which is a semi-closed primary. Those are the 3 that I think that Bernie Sanders has the best chance in. I personally believe he's going to win all 3, but Ohio I think is probably the closest one. That could go either way. I guess Illinois could too. I don't think it will. I think Ohio's the closest. It could go either way. It's probably going to be a slight margin, whoever wins it. But that'll be an interesting one to watch. North Carolina, though, I believe, is a semi-closed primary, so it does not have that benefit that the others do for Bernie Sanders. It's going to be mostly Democratic voters. It's going to be all Democratic voters because even if they weren't previously registered as Democrats, they have to register as Democrats to vote in that primary. So that gives the advantage to Hillary Clinton, actually. So yeah, and the polls have her up by averaging about 20. Her leads are averaging about 20 in recent polls. So I think that she's going to win probably about 15 to 20 there in North Carolina. And on the Republican side, I don't think I've seen a poll that didn't have Donald Trump winning there easily. So no reason to believe he's not going to win there. in North Carolina as well. And then lastly, we have Florida on the Democratic side. This one seems like the safest pick for the Democrats. Hillary Clinton is almost certain to win Florida. It'll probably be declared within a minute of voting being done. So, yeah, it's a closed primary, which is advantageous for Hillary Clinton, and the polling has her up by consistently over 20. So I think that that's going to be about a 25 to 25 point. Did I say 25 twice? Sorry, 20 to 25 point lead or a victory for Hillary Clinton, which is a big win for her. It does not, that type of win, even in a big state like Florida, does not mean it's over. Too much of the media talks, when they talk about the delegates, they include super delegates, which they shouldn't be. So I don't know. On the Democratic side, I don't know who this is really a win for. I would say that it's more of a win for Bernie Sanders because he's going to win. I believe he's going to win 3 of the 5 states. If he does, it's going to be basically a wash on delegates, but I think that it improves the momentum that he's built. But eventually he's going, and especially when you consider that we've had a lot of southern states, which had been advantageous for Hillary Clinton, we're going to get to some states that are going to benefit Bernie Sanders more. So people talk about she has such a sizable delegate lead, but there's a good chance he could win most of the states coming up. So we'll just have to see. It's not going to be over after today, but that's where I think things stand on the Democratic side, who I think is going to win there. And then on the Republican side in Florida, it's another pretty safe bet here. Donald Trump is almost certain to win Florida. Almost every poll has him with a 20-point lead. This is going to be, it should be the end for Marco Rubio. After he almost certainly loses his home state, he's probably going to have to drop out. And so, yeah, he's probably going to win by a sizable margin. Donald Trump will. So I think that on the Republican side, this thing's almost going to get locked up today, whether Donald Trump wins Ohio or not, because he's most likely going to win at least 4 states. And Florida is also a winner-take-all state on the Republican side. That's a lot of delegates. So, I mean, if he wins Ohio as well, which I'm not predicting, but if he does, then this thing's essentially over. Donald Trump is going to be the Republican nominee. If John Kasich is able to win Ohio, and again, if John Kasich loses Ohio, he's going to be out as well. And he said so himself. But if he wins Ohio, he should stay in it, and it's going to lead to some interesting discussions. And while Donald Trump is almost certain to get the most delegates, it could lead to a contested convention for the Republicans. And that'll be really interesting to watch, see what happens there. So this could be over on both sides, potentially, but I don't think it will based on my predictions of how each side is going to go. So, yeah, I guess that's basically my thoughts on today's primaries. And like, subscribe, and comment down below. And thanks for watching. And yeah, I'll see you guys next time.